Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's broadcast. This is your host, Patricia, and I want to welcome you to the dialogue. So, today it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm just going to jump straight into it for the sake of saving time. Hopefully, we're not interrupted. Of course, I am driving, so hopefully, you can hear me pretty clearly, and I just hope that you get everything out of it that is needed to be obtained for you to either migrate or move forward in your life. So, I want to start by telling you a story from when I was a little girl. I was 12 years old, and at the time, my mother was enrolled in school for business in college. And so I think she might have been in her early 30s or so. Yeah, early or mid 30s. And so she was enrolled in school. And at the time, my grandmother became ill. She became sick at the time. They didn't know what it was, but years later we actually found out what it was, what the cause of it was. We thought that it was a natural situation. It was actually something that was spiritual, but we didn't find this out. I didn't find it out until I was like in my mid 20s, where she was actually able to elaborate on what took place with her. I will say that as far as her story for discretionary purposes. Nevertheless, at about 11 or 12 years old, for some reason, in our family, they decided and asked me, but ultimately decided that I would be the one that would go and take care of my grandmother. So, this meant that I didn't have a normal childhood. So prior to that, in any way, I was already cleaning up in the house and cooking and doing certain things because my mother was gone. So my chores consisted of cleaning, cooking, washing dishes, doing laundry. And at the time, I just felt like it was all on me, that my brothers, which were older and younger, didn't really have as much responsibility as I did. I want to put this disclaimer in there really quickly. If you are a woman and or a father, please don't make your daughters do more than the sons do in regards to cleaning. When you get older, we all need to know how to cook and clean, because everybody is not going to have someone in their life, a spouse, boyfriend, or girlfriend, to cook or clean for them. If they don't know how, ultimately it may potentially lead into them treating people as maids. Okay, so back to the story. I cooked, I cleaned, and I pretty much took care of myself because my mom was at work all the time and at school. So then my grandmother gets sick. Like I said, they decide that it's a good idea for me to go and take care of her. The problem with that was that I had to give up my childhood, meaning that I went to school, which I was enrolled in middle school. I would go to school, and then I would come straight home, pack more clothes, stand outside for about 5 minutes or 10 minutes before my mother came and took me back over my grandmother's house. And when she took me over my grandmother's house, my grandmother would have these things, and they were seizures. So she was not able to move a lot. It would be to the point where she would have a seizure. She would have to lay in the bed. I would have to sometimes not, I didn't ever have to put a spoon down her throat or anything like that, but I did have to make sure that she didn't choke. Sometimes if she felt so fatigued or tired because of the seizure, I would have to get her food. And sometimes I also had to make sure, not that she took her bath, but just that she was okay with getting in and doing certain things as she stood. And so, can you imagine being 11 or 12 in the house with someone as a little girl? You don't know that this health condition is not going to lead to death. So, for one, I was traumatized sitting in a house with this woman, my grandmother at the time, and that I was going to lose her. Because me and my grandmother had actually got very, very close at that time in my life. She actually became more like a best friend. She would tell me things that happened to her in her childhood experiences, how she actually ended up in Akron, Ohio, and we just talked. But I didn't notice it now until I got older, is that I was actually counseling my grandma at 12 years old. It was things that she would tell me, and I would listen to her, and in me asking her questions, she would get a different perspective and or think about the situation differently. So how many of you know that is actually what a counselor does? They come in with different ways or tactics or scenarios or situations to help you think and view a situation differently, to give you a different perspective so that you can get past it, move on, and or let go. And so, as I sat with my grandmother, and this went on for I think a year and a half or 2 years, I sat in the house with her. The beautiful part about it was that my granddad was an amazing man. So not only did they make sure that I ate and, I had wonderful things, they also paid me. So at the end of the week, every week, my granddad would give me $25. So as a 12-year-old, I'm making like $100 a week on top of having everything paid for, compensated for. I felt like I was in a great position. I felt very blessed and fortunate to be the one that was making money for sitting somewhere and talking. So as I got older, I inevitably went that route. I remember when I was 12 years old that I said, when they ask you what you want to be, what are your career goals, what do you want to become? And I said that I would like to become a counselor or psychiatrist. And then I put psychologist. I'm sorry, psychologist. And I actually spelled it right, which was funny. And then I also put that I wanted to be a doctor. And so I put these two things on my list. And so as time goes on, I have a natural knack for talking to people. I mean, there were strangers that would come up to me and tell me situations and things that they were going through, and I never knew them. When I was homeless, people would talk to me out on the street. If I was on the bus, people would just find comfort in being able to talk to me and divulge their personal information. And I'm talking about things that they haven't even discussed or disclosed with other people. And so I did that for years. I talked to people, I counseled people, asked them questions. A lot of it also, when I went through my spot of homelessness, which was transiency, I stayed in so many houses and did the same thing that I did with my grandmother. I sat there. These people would go to work, they would go to school, they would tend to their children, and I would just sit there and be available to talk, be available to counsel them. And so, inevitably, that went into my whole life. My whole life has become sitting down wherever I am at the time, waiting for someone to call me. If they have a problem, they call me, we hash it out, we talk it out. I give them different perspective, and then they feel better for that moment. For that moment. Some of them go back into doing the same thing, same scenario, same situations, and I'm still sitting. And I'm still waiting for people to call. Okay? If you understand what happened to me, that set up a pattern in my life of codependency. So the topic of this podcast is going to be about codependency and what codependency did to me. At the time, I did not know it was codependency, but as I've gotten older and I went through classes and session in school, I am learning to understand what codependency actually does for a person, or to a person, so we say. So as I sat over there with my grandmother, her life became my life, which means that I didn't have a life. I couldn't get out the house when I wanted to. I couldn't do things that I wanted to do. I did go to dances at school, but if anybody went to Perkins, a lot of it was they give us dances at 7th and 8th grade period. So a lot of things after school I didn't get a chance to do. I couldn't do the cheerleading team. I couldn't do the dance team. It was so many things that I was not able to do because I sacrificed to sit there with my grandmother. Point number one, when you are codependent, you sacrifice your life for the welfare and well-being of another person, which means that you sit around, you wait for them to call, you wait for them to make you feel valuable. Meaning, their drama, their issues, and their problems, you take them on as if they are your own, and it is your responsibility to switch them, change them, and or get them out of it. And so ultimately, you lose your life. You lose your life. And I'll give you a couple examples of when I predominantly see this happen. I see this happen a lot of times with people that are on substance and drug abuse. I've also had that in my family, where there has been people that were either on drugs or the other one. We'll just leave it at that. And I gave my life to these people to try to show them and talk to them about having a better way of living at the cost of my own freedom and identity, learning myself and what I wanted to do in my life. So that is part of what codependency does. Let me piggyback real quick and just give you the definition of codependency, or I will paraphrase it for you so that you get a little bit more understanding. Codependency is basically exchanging your life for someone else's. Their life becomes your life, and you do whatever you can to make sure that they're okay at the expense of yourself. Meaning that you can lose your identity, you can lose your passion, you can lose your desire for things, your momentum to go, move, and enjoy life. It literally comes in and it takes over your life. I classify it as bondage, meaning that you can't move, you don't know how to be, you don't know how to live without that person. I mean, your life, you're enmeshed in one another. But this person can go and do as they free will please because you're not actually on their mind per se, because they're just doing what they want to do, unless that person has codependency. They are on your mind. You are more concerned for them, if they ate, if they slept. What are they doing? Are they okay? Your mind is just all about them. All about them. And so we also see this with people, unfortunately, that do have cancer and are sick. The person, the caregiver, or the person that takes care of them becomes so, like I said, enmeshed in them that they don't think about anybody else with themselves. You see a lot of times when people are sick, the other person, they say, can also be sick as well and goes through as much detriment because they don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't take care of themselves. So that is what that does. And so can you imagine being 11 or 12 being a very pivotal time when you're supposed to be getting to know yourself or trying new things, or not necessarily dating, but you're at a pivotal time of identity when you're 12. So that is what happens. You lose yourself. You lose yourself, and it's very traumatizing. And so once I got older, I would stay back with my grandmother again because there were things going on in my own personal home. However, it was the same thing again. I remember sitting in this recliner chair that she had at the time. One of my cousins was going through something, so she was also staying with us as well. So she slept in a bed, and I would sit on the recliner. I watched a lot of Golden Girls at the time and other TV shows, but that's what my life consisted of. I sat in a room, watched TV, and talked on the phone. That was my entertainment. And so, once again, I counseled the first person that ever had been molested at 12 years old. I had a good friend that actually ended up coming out and telling me that she had been molested, and we cried and we talked about it. And I asked her, I don't know who I thought I was at 12 years old. I asked her, did you tell anybody? Did you make anybody aware? And all different types of stuff. And then now that I am older, my occupation just until Thursday was a counselor. And so I went into chemical dependency counseling, where you actually speak to people and talk to people that are on drugs. And so they come in because it is part of the recovery program. They speak to you about their issues and their problems, and they also talk to you about why they're using, are they in active addiction, is it illicit drugs, and so forth. And so you offer a new perspective for them for recovery. Ironically, I have never been one that has actually physically participated in drug usage myself. I just have had years of being able to understand and pinpoint through God and the Holy Spirit what a person is going through. It's like He gives you words of knowledge and insight, revelation to help this person. Okay, you've been molested, you've been touched, you have a broken family, your father abandoned you, your mother rejected you, and so forth. And so when you go in and you help them understand the root, ultimately it is up to them to use what you gave them to become or do better. So as I stated, up until Thursday, right? So let me get to the main point. Codependency affects everybody differently, but ultimately you lose yourself. You lose yourself, and when you come out, you don't have an identity because your identity is in that other person. You heard me detail that this actually happened until Thursday. So I've been doing the chemical dependency counseling for about 2 years now. And so I heard this message this morning, and the lady basically said that it is okay to not want some things that you prayed for. I said, that's interesting. So I have been reaching out to several different people, asking them could they give me my points or hours that I would need to get this new license. I have my CDCA. The next license will be the next one because I currently will have a bachelor's in school, a bachelor's in psychology. And so ironically today, for some reason, I just sat up and said, I don't want to do that anymore. And this is coming because I feel like God is saying you're in a time of restoration. Codependency is not fun because you take on everybody else's problems to the point where a lot of times they are miserable. So I couldn't understand why a lot of my friendships have been that we get on the phone, we talk about our problems, and some of us are going through the same thing at the very same time. However, when I just had my daughter, for some reason, I don't really want to talk about negative, bad things all the time. So I noticed this past weekend, it was about 4 or 5 people that reached out to me and contacted me. Probably over the last month, it's probably been like 7. And I haven't returned any phone calls. And I didn't feel bad about it either. Not only did I not answer the phone, I didn't return any of the phone calls. And I questioned, okay, well, what's going on? Why would that be? And I can ultimately tell you that a lot of these relationships that I have created in or been involved in have been codependent relationships. Meaning that we come around each other or contact each other when something very terrible is going on. I noticed that a lot of my friendships, we do not contact each other when it is good things going on. For instance, I recently just got blessed with a couple things and some wonderful, let's just say miraculous things that God has done. My friends are so used to me being in such of a troublesome situation that now that things are getting better and lighter for me, there is nobody around. There's nobody around and there's nobody to talk to. And I couldn't understand that. Like, okay, what would make a person not want to be around at such an important, pivotal time in my life? And it's because codependency is not necessarily a good thing. It isn't about negativity. It is about drama. It's like you're fueled through toxicity because being connected to these people, it is very toxic. It's like misery loves company. This person is miserable, so you come in on the back end to support them in their misery, ultimately becoming miserable. And so God has been dealing with me about restoration, and ultimately it's mental imprisonment to be connected to people that are consistently and constantly going through. And I notice sometimes when I get on the phone with good people, this thing is so, it can be so enmeshed in your mind that things will be okay and you will just harp on the things that are bad. You will just go down a laundry list of things that are bad. And so for some reason this week, I just feel like I don't want to answer my phone. I don't want to talk, and I don't want to be bothered, to reframe myself from being the counselor, the codependent one, the one that needed someone to be there. So what it is that in order for you to get a piece size of what you want, you sacrifice and give so much and receive so little. Now that I'm getting older, so many things are changing for me. There are so many things that I want to be and become different. So there are things that I will have to do, because you have to remember, a 12-year-old girl, whatever is etched in your mind becomes a pattern. That pattern becomes your lifestyle. It becomes a habit. It becomes your lifestyle. My lifestyle consists of counseling people and then they walk away. Okay, that's fine. But now I'm to the point where I'm getting older. I need to establish a little bit more, some differences in my relationships with people. And I don't really want to do the same thing. I don't want to talk about the same thing over and over. And so I would tell you, for me, things are getting better. They're getting more lighthearted because I'm taking the initiative to not always just jump on the phone with people that want to talk about not necessarily nothing, because it is things that they are going through. However, I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that. And so with that being said, today I think that I am making up my mind to go through a dramatic change. I couldn't understand why, when I left my job on Thursday, why it was so hard for me and why I felt so touched. And it was because I don't think I was just leaving a job or a career. I think I was also leaving a lifestyle. And that's what it boils down to. Codependency has to die. And that's actually what I'm going to title this message. Codependency has to die. It has to come a point in a person's life where they just simply say, I don't want to be the person that is there for others more than I am for myself. I do not, and I don't have to love other people more than I love myself. Because God even said, love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you're not loving yourself at all, taking care of your basic needs at all, you cannot expect to do that for someone else. And so I want to challenge you today, because codependency leads to frustration, it leads to anger, it leads to unfulfillment, it leads to disappointment, because you are giving out, but you're not receiving in at the level that you should back in. And I put out so much. No, I am not receiving anything that I should. It is time for the scales to be balanced. It is time for things to be equal. I'm not saying in every single relationship that I have, but in a lot of them that I am going to be cultivating and creating, it needs to be equal or somewhat better. And for the ones that are not, I understand. So, for those of you that are codependent, you can tell and analyze, because you're the one taking on majority of relationship all the time. So, codependency has to die. If it dies, it starts with you. If it dies, that means you are starting something new and you will start a new life. I hope this helps somebody to understand that you are not responsible for another person's life more than your own, unless it's your children or you're married. Even with that, you still have to balance that, because you still have to have self-care to take care of yourself. So I love you very much. I wanted to get on and do this podcast very quickly. I'm about to go and do some things to nurture and love on myself. I pray and hope that you are doing the same. Please share this message with someone that you think it can help. You can follow and as well subscribe to the podcast to receive more updates and more information. Remember that I love you, God loves you, and have a good day. Goodbye, everybody.